So I got something super cool for you today. Um, and when I say cool, I mean like absolutely disturbing and horrific. But you know what I mean, right? Welcome to another episode of Doors, where we open the door to stories that are sometimes better left closed.
And I am so excited to dive into this one with you today. It's one of those cases that, completely blew my mind when I first heard about it. Seriously, the details are just, they're wild.
I should probably introduce us for anyone who's new here. I'm Crystal.
And I'm Justin. We're your guides through the darkest corridors of true crime on Doors.
Today, we're covering the really disturbing case of Stephen Pladl. This one's got everything: family secrets, forbidden relationships, and a horrific murder-suicide that spread across 3 different states.
Yeah, it's the story of a man who, and I'm not exaggerating here, reconnected with his biological daughter after she was adopted, started a romantic relationship with her, got her pregnant, and then, well, things took an even darker turn after that.
It's seriously one of the most twisted family tragedies I've ever researched. And now there's even a Lifetime movie about it called Husband, Father, Killer: The Alyssa Pladl Story.
So the background on Katie Pladl is actually really important to understand this whole case. Her biological mother, Alyssa Pladl, she put Katie up for adoption when she was born, and that was partly because, this is really messed up, but Stephen, the father, had been abusing Alyssa. It wasn't a good situation at all, and Alyssa was trying to protect her daughter. You know what I mean?
Oh my god, that's horrible. So Katie never even knew her biological parents growing up.
Exactly. She was raised by her adoptive family, the Fuscos, and by all accounts, they were loving parents who gave her a totally normal childhood. But, and this happens a lot with adopted kids, she got really curious about her biological family when she got older.
I mean, that makes sense, right? Like, wanting to know where you came from.
Totally normal. So what happened was, when Katie turned 18 in 2016, she used social media to track down her biological parents, and she actually found them and reached out. At this point, Stephen and Alyssa were still married, and they had 2 other kids together after Katie.
And so they welcomed her into their lives just like that?
Yeah, they did. And at first, everything seemed fine, you know? But here's where things get really twisted. Shortly after Katie reconnected with her biological family, Stephen and Alyssa's marriage started falling apart. They separated, and then Katie moved in with Stephen. Just the 2 of them living together.
Oh no, I can already see where this is going.
Yeah, it's honestly the worst possible scenario, right? Here's this young woman who's trying to find her roots, connect with her biological family, and instead, she ends up in this incredibly inappropriate relationship with her own father. And that's what set the stage for the absolute tragedy that followed.
So, what exactly happened after Katie moved in with Stephen? How did their relationship, change?
Yeah, so this is where things get really disturbing. After Katie moved in with Stephen, their relationship it completely transformed, right? Instead of having a normal father-daughter relationship that they should have been developing, they started, and I hate even saying this, they started having a romantic and sexual relationship. Her biological father.
That's absolutely horrifying. How does something like that even happen?
Well, there's this psychological phenomenon called genetic sexual attraction, which can sometimes happen when biological relatives meet for the first time as adults. But that doesn't make it okay, right? And in this case, Stephen was 40-something, and Katie was just barely an adult. And he was her father. There's this massive power imbalance that it makes the whole thing even more twisted.
Was anyone aware of what was happening between them?
That's the thing. They weren't exactly hiding it. They were living together as if they were a couple. And eventually, Alyssa, Katie's biological mom, she found out what was happening. She discovered these entries in one of her other children's diaries that mentioned how Katie was now acting as their stepmom, which is just, can you imagine?
Oh God, that poor woman. Finding that out about your ex-husband and your daughter.
Exactly. And it gets worse, because in 2017, Katie actually got pregnant. They had a baby boy together in September 2017 and named him Bennett. So now Stephen was both the father and the grandfather of this child. It's just, it's beyond comprehension, you know what I mean?
I don't even know what to say. Did they, like, try to pass as a normal couple to the outside world?
Yeah, they absolutely did. They were living together in North Carolina, and they were basically presenting themselves as a married couple. Katie even posted pictures on Instagram where she was calling Steven her husband, not her father. And they had this newborn baby, and they were acting like this was normal, like this wasn't completely illegal and morally reprehensible.
So they were just out in the open with this relationship?
For a while, yeah. Which is part of what's so shocking. They weren't even trying that hard to hide it. But obviously, this couldn't last forever, right? I mean, this was a ticking time bomb from the very beginning.
So, what happened to them legally? I mean, they couldn't just continue living like that, right?
Oh, absolutely not. So, in January 2018, things finally came crashing down for them. The authorities, finally caught up with what was happening, and they were both charged with incest. And, incest is actually a pretty serious crime in most states. In North Carolina, where they were living, it's a Class F felony, which carries, up to 41 months in prison.
That seems almost, I don't know, not enough somehow?
I know what you mean. And the thing is, the charges came after an investigation that started when Alyssa, Katie's biological mom, reported what was happening to the police. She was, rightfully concerned about this whole situation. And when the police looked into it, they found out about the baby and everything else that was going on between them.
So, what happened after they were charged? Did they go to jail immediately?
Well, they were arrested, but they were released on bond. And this is where things get really complicated because the court ordered that they couldn't have any contact with each other. None whatsoever. And Katie was actually sent back to New York State to live with her adoptive parents, the people who raised her, right? The people who were her real parents in every way that matters.
What about the baby? What happened to little Bennett?
That's actually one of the most heartbreaking parts of this whole story. The baby initially stayed with Steven's mother, so the child's grandmother, and also technically his great-grandmother, which is just so messed up to even say out loud. But that was just a temporary situation, while the courts were figuring out what to do.
This must have put so much strain on their relationship. I mean, beyond the obvious issues.
Exactly. And, there were these massive social consequences too. Imagine the public shame and the judgment they faced. Katie especially was really isolated from her friends. And I think Steven was starting to realize that his whole life was falling apart, right? He'd lost his wife, he was facing felony charges, and now he couldn't even see Katie or the baby. And for someone who clearly had serious psychological issues to begin with, this was like a powder keg waiting to explode.
Did they try to fight the charges at all?
They didn't really get the chance to. The legal process was just beginning, but what happened next just completely overshadowed everything else. The entire situation took this incredibly dark turn that I don't think anyone saw coming. I mean, people knew it was bad, but nobody could have predicted just how tragic this was all going to end.
So, what exactly happened next? Because I feel like we're leading up to something really awful here.
Yeah, it's honestly just devastating what happened next. So in April 2018, specifically April 11th, things took this, unimaginably dark turn. Steven, who was clearly in this really unstable mental state, did something. Something truly horrific. He killed baby Bennett, his own 7-month-old son, at his home in North Carolina.
Oh my God, the baby, that's absolutely heartbreaking.
I know, it's just, it's beyond comprehension. And the thing is, he didn't stop there. After killing Bennett, he got in his car and drove hundreds of miles north to Connecticut, where Katie was staying with her adoptive parents. And the next morning, on April 12th, he found Katie and her adoptive father, Anthony Fusco, in their vehicle.
Wait, so he tracked them down like he was hunting them?
Exactly that. He had clearly been planning this whole thing. He followed them and then just opened fire on their car, killed them both right there in New Milford, Connecticut. Katie was only 20 years old, and Anthony was 56. Just gunned down in cold blood.
This is just, I don't even know what to say. 3 people murdered across different states?
Yeah, it was this multi-state murder spree. And after killing Katie and Anthony, Steven drove to Dover, New York, which is, not far from the Connecticut border, and that's where he took his own life. The police found him dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound on some road called Dogtail Corners Road.
So he killed his daughter/wife, their baby, her adoptive father, and then himself? All within what, like 24 hours?
Yeah, pretty much. It all happened so fast. And you know what's really chilling about all this? The way the police found out about it was through a 911 call from Stephen's mother. She called emergency services in complete panic because Stephen had actually called her and confessed to the killings.
His own mother had to report him?
Yeah, can you imagine getting that call? Your son telling you he just murdered your grandchild and was going after others? It's unthinkable. And this all played out across 3 different states: North Carolina, Connecticut, and New York. The police departments were all scrambling to coordinate as this was happening, but by the time they pieced it all together, 4 people were already dead. So the thing that, really broke this case open was this absolutely chilling 911 call. Stephen's mother, she called emergency services in just complete panic, and the call was later released by the Knightdale police in North Carolina, which gives us this really disturbing window into what was happening.
Wait, what did she say on the call?
So in this call, his mother is just, she's absolutely devastated because Stephen had actually called her and, straight up confessed to killing Bennett. Like, imagine being a grandmother and getting that call from your own son saying he just murdered your grandchild. It's unimaginable, right?
Oh my God, that poor woman. I can't even begin to imagine what that must have been like for her.
Exactly. And in the 911 call, she was trying to, alert the authorities about everything that had happened and what she thought might still be happening. She was basically the one who connected all the dots for the police, you know what I mean? Without her call, it might have taken way, way longer to figure out that these murders across different states were all connected.
So how did the authorities actually piece everything together? This spans 3 states, right?
Yeah, it was this massive, multi-state investigation. So the authorities first discovered baby Bennett's body in North Carolina. Then, hundreds of miles away in New Milford, Connecticut, they found Katie and her adoptive father, Anthony, after they'd been shot. And finally, they located Stephen's body in Dover, New York.
That's a lot of jurisdictions to coordinate between.
Totally. The police departments in all 3 states had to work together super quickly to piece everything together. They had to, figure out the timeline, track Stephen's movements between states. It was this massive coordination effort, And the thing is, they were kind of always a step behind because Stephen was moving so fast between states. By the time they really understood what was happening, 4 people were already dead.
Did they ever find any notes or anything explaining why he did this?
Well, there wasn't an actual suicide note that was made public. But from what his mother said in that 911 call, it seems like he was just completely unhinged after Katie had broken things off with him. He couldn't handle the rejection and the fact that he was facing these incest charges. It was like this perfect storm of rage and probably some serious mental instability that just exploded in the worst possible way.
So, with this whole horrifying situation, I've been wondering about the psychology behind it all. What would make someone do something this extreme?
That's such a complicated question. I think there are several psychological factors at play here. First of all, there's this thing called genetic sexual attraction, and this is actually something that can happen when biological relatives meet as adults after being separated during formative years.
Wait, that's actually a recognized phenomenon?
Yeah, it's a real thing that psychologists have observed. When family members reunite after long separations, particularly during those early years, they sometimes experience these intense feelings that can be misinterpreted as romantic attraction. But you know what I mean. The crucial thing to remember is that Stephen was the father, the adult, the one with all the power in this relationship.
That's a really important distinction.
Absolutely. And there's also the whole control aspect of it. From what we know about Stephen's background and the fact that Alyssa, Katie's biological mother, had put Katie up for adoption partly because of his abuse. This suggests he had these deeply embedded patterns of control and manipulation.
So when Katie broke things off?
Exactly. When she ended the relationship, it was probably like this complete loss of control for him. And some people with certain personality disorders just, They can't handle that kind of rejection or loss of control. They'd rather destroy what they can't have, you know?
Do you think there were any warning signs that might have been missed?
Oh God, definitely. I mean, someone who had previously been abusive enough that his wife put their child up for adoption. That's already a major red flag. And then the fact that he was willing to engage in an incestuous relationship with his own daughter. That shows such a profound lack of boundaries and, like, moral reasoning.
It seems like there must have been some serious mental health issues involved too.
For sure, while we can't diagnose him specifically, people who commit these kinds of family annihilator crimes often have some combination of narcissistic traits, antisocial personality disorder, or possibly even psychopathy. There's this. Quote, this inability to see other people as fully human, with their own rights and autonomy. To Stephen, it seems like Katie and Bennett were possessions, not people.
That's so disturbing to think about.
It really is. And what's particularly tragic is that, quote, that Bennett, this innocent baby, and Anthony Fusco, Katie's adoptive father, were killed as extensions of Stephen's rage toward Katie. It's like, in his mind, if he couldn't have his daughter, then nobody could have her or the child they created together. It's this twisted, horrifying logic that makes sense only to someone in a profoundly disturbed psychological state.
So, speaking of this case, I saw that Lifetime actually made a movie about it. Husband, Father, Killer, the Alyssa Pladl story. Have you seen it yet?
Oh yeah, I watched it last weekend actually. It's pretty new. It just came out in 2024, and it really focuses on the perspective of Alyssa, Katie's biological mother, which I thought was an interesting angle to take with the whole story.
Where can people watch it if they're interested?
So right now, if you have Lifetime Movies, you can stream it totally free until April 21st. After that, you'd need to purchase it. I think it's available on A+E networks for like $5.99. Or, if you prefer, you can rent it on YouTube for just $2.99. It's definitely worth checking out if you're interested in understanding more about this case.
Does the movie cover everything we've talked about on Doors today?
It does hit most of the major points we've discussed, yeah. But you know what's interesting is how media coverage of cases like this really shapes public perception. Like, some outlets focused heavily on the incest angle, while others emphasize the murder-suicide aspect.
I've noticed that too. It's almost like different outlets pick different parts of the story to sensationalize.
Exactly. And that's something we really try to avoid here on Doors, right? We want to give a complete picture. The thing that struck me about this case is how little attention was given to the early warning signs. There were these clear patterns of abuse that existed long before the murders, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it seems like the most shocking parts get all the headlines, but the buildup gets overlooked.
Totally. And I think the Lifetime movie actually does a decent job of showing that progression. It's not just about the horrific endpoint, but about all the steps that led there. They show how Stephen's controlling behavior escalated over time, which is something that the true crime coverage doesn't always capture effectively.
Do they address the impact on the extended family and community?
They touch on it, but I think that's something that's really hard to fully portray. The ripple effects of a tragedy like this go so far beyond just the immediate victims. There's this whole community in Dover that was affected, the family members left behind. It's devastating on so many levels.
So, as we start to wrap up our discussion about this truly horrific case, I can't help but think about all the victims here. It's so heartbreaking, isn't it?
It really is. And you know what really gets to me about this whole situation? It's that little Bennett, Katie, Anthony. They were all just caught in this web of manipulation and control that Stephen had been weaving for years. And when you look back at the whole timeline, there were so many red flags, so many warning signs that something was seriously wrong with this man.
I think that's what makes cases like this so, I don't know, so haunting, because when you step back, there's this clear pattern of escalating behavior that, if someone had been able to intervene at the right moment, maybe things could have ended differently.
Absolutely. The abuse that Katie's biological mother experienced, Stephen's controlling behavior, the way he manipulated Katie when she was vulnerable and looking for connection, quote, these are all textbook warning signs of dangerous family dynamics. And I think that's something we really need to pay attention to as a society, recognizing these patterns before they escalate to tragedy.
It's like we need to get better at seeing the whole picture rather than just reacting to the final horrific act.
Exactly. And that's what we try to do here on Doors, right? We don't just focus on the sensational aspects, but really dig into the human elements and the warning signs that were missed along the way. Because ultimately, that's how we learn from these tragedies.
Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this difficult but important discussion. We know these topics aren't easy to hear about, but understanding them is so crucial.
Yeah, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of Doors. Next week, we're going to be exploring another case that really challenges our perception of family dynamics and trust. It's the story of the Broberg family and their daughter Yan, who was kidnapped multiple times by a family friend. Honestly, it's another tough one, but it's got some really important lessons about manipulation and grooming.
So until next time, remember to look out for one another and, as we always say here on Doors, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that could happen right next door.
See you next week, everyone.